Okay, so the topic for today is national education policy, and I recently had a conversation on a podcast on the same topic, and I received a lot of feedback. So I will be discussing that also, what people are saying, and taking that into account. This talk will be hopefully better in that regard. So basically, the new education policy that we will be discussing today, it is focuses on three issues. One is school education. One is higher education, and there are three four other aspects also. For example, e-learning and implementation deadlines, how it will be implemented, what will come first, and other things. So in this talk we will be focusing mostly on school education and higher education. In the school education, we will divide this discussion into three parts. uh, First is the policies that are affecting that will be affecting government schools. Then we will be talking about the policy proposals that will be affecting private schools, and then there are some proposals which apply to both, whether they are private schools or government schools. For example, its curriculum, it applies to both, whether students are studying in a government school or private school. So we will first be talking about the government schools. Now, in government schools, the NEP that zeroes in on the major problem is basically the poor learning outcomes as the biggest symptom of the problem, and of course the lack of resources. Now, the policies that the government has recommended through national education policy, policy proposals that the government is recommending through national education policy vis-a-vis government schools is basically highlighted the problem of lack of incentives. Okay, and that is the biggest problem they have identified, and the main symptom of that is they have zeroed in on is the lack of learning outcomes that students are taking away from these schools where they are studying. Now these are these are big problems, but they are not the main problem that are afflicting the government school system, which according to me and other many other experts is the lack of incentives for teachers to teach well, and attracting more and more students even from the rural areas. That's a big challenge right now, because between 2010 11 and 2015 16, according to a research by Professor Geeta Gandhi Kingdon, 1.3 crore students left the government school system, and 1.7 crore students joined private schools. So what we have essentially is that enrollment in government schools decreased by 1.3 crore students between these 5 years. This is the data only for these 5 years. And enrollment in private schools increased by 1.7 crore students. And this is, as you can see on the table, this is the data only for 20 states of India. So I think if we take other states and union territories, then we will find that the problem is more severe than what is in this research, because Geeta Gandhi Kingdom, she did not find the data for other states. And if we find that, I think we will find that around 2 crore students may have left the government school system. So this shows that even in rural areas, as you can see, so many rural states, for example, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, where there are no big cities as such. No, mostly rural areas are there. In Chhattisgarh, Bihar, you can see how many students have left and compare the changes accordingly. So the problem is pan India, and from that data we can see that the problem is essentially not of governance, but the whole system itself. There is something fundamentally wrong with the government school system. Now, what that is, uh, the government's NEP, the National Education Policy, has highlighted five problems that it thought that was wrong with the government school system. So what they said, what is the NEP's diagnosis of the problem? It's fivefold. One is they say that there is lack of early childhood care and education. So there are like 85%, they have highlighted this statistic that 85% of a child's cumulative brain development occurs prior to the age of 6. But that is the age where most of the students, at least in government schools, start their schooling. So, I mean, in private schools, we know that parents start sending their kids at 3 or 4 years of age. But in rural areas, what happens is they go to Anganwadis from age 3 to say 5 or 6, and then they enter the government school system. So government has said that by the time they are coming to the school, they are joining the school. Most of the cumulative their brain development has already happened. So those are 3 4 years are the lowest years of the child. So the government should focus on those years. Otherwise, what happens is they join late, and their learning outcomes are severely affected compared to other students. So that is the focus area that the government has highlighted, that we will not only get these students early in the school system, but also develop special curriculum that will focus on their age and what they should learn in those 3 4 years. Now, this second problem they have said is that curriculum in initial grades fails in imparting foundational literacy and numeracy in kids. So, one of the ASER reports that usually does research on learning outcomes of the students, it found that there was a 20% gap between students who were in class 5, but they could not read class 3 text, and there was a 20% gap in learning outcomes in their ability to read between students who were in government schools versus students who were in private schools. So private school students were doing much better, and this is the data from rural areas. So it's not comparing students who are in rural areas versus students in urban areas. It's basically comparing a child who is studying in a private school versus a child who is studying in government school and hails from the same village or same rural cluster of villages. Okay, so this is the second problem they have identified, that the curriculum, that the syllabus in government schools does not focus on imparting foundational literacy and numeracy. Now, what is foundational literacy and numeracy? It's basically ability to read text and do simple maths. Sum, minus, not even multiplication. I think that is for higher level, class fifth, class seventh, class eighth. But for class third, it's basically just a sum and basic reading of the text in their mother tongue. So this is second problem they have identified. Third, they have said is that lack of teachers who are specially trained for early childhood care and education. This is the problem. I mean, of course, if there is no ECCE as such already in the system, there are lack of teachers, of course. Another problem is that higher pupil teacher ratio. So they say that there are less number of teachers and the most number of students. So that needs to be focused. If people remember, under Right to Education Act that came in 2009, the government had identified a special ratio that there should be in private schools, there should be this many teachers for this many students. Okay. So the government accepts that even in government schools, This is a major problem. There are less number of teachers, but more students. We will come to that later, whether that is true or not. But this is, I'm reading out what the government has identified as the problem. Fourth problem they have identified is poor health and lack of good quality nutrition and insufficient quantity, leading to poor learning outcomes. So basically, the problem is that most of these students who are studying in government schools hail from rural areas, villages, and disadvantaged backgrounds, and they don't get the food, proper nutrition. Uh, so that is also affecting their learning ability. Fifth problem, and the final problem they have identified, is poor access to these schools and dropouts due to lack of infrastructure. So there are not enough toilets, not enough facilities in schools to keep the children there. So these are the five problems that they have identified. We will see whether they are true or not. But anyway, let's just focus on whether they are true or not right now. Anyway, this is the 21% gap that I said is there between learning outcomes between students in private schools and public schools. The government has identified certain problems, but let's look at the reality on the ground. Now, compared to private schools, the government schools have more qualified teachers. Okay, the problem is not of qualification. You will find that in government schools, all teachers will have great degrees. They are paid very well. Starting salary of a government school teacher is around 45 to 50,000 per month, while the same in private school would be around 10,000, and they are never paid on time. And of course, the expenditure, per pupil expenditure in government schools is many times higher than private schools. Why? Well, most of the component is from due to the teacher's salary, because they are paid so much. Okay. In basic infrastructure, I would not say it's better when you compare a private school in Delhi to a public school in UP. But if you are comparing a budget private school to a government school, for example, in my whatever I have seen in my area, my state, you will find that the government schools have much bigger playgrounds. They have decent quality of rooms, but not the infrastructure in form of benches and other things. And of course, the computer rooms and other lab facilities. That infrastructure is not that great. It is there, but it's not usually does not work or other things. But even in the if you see look at the area, of course, the government school complex will be much larger in size compared to a budget private schools, where, for example, I studied. It was barely, very small, and it had like 15 classrooms. When you compare it to a government school, it is much bigger building, bigger playground, other things. Now, in private schools, there is no midday meal. They don't give any free meals to anyone. Even then, they have in government schools, you have and focus on nutrition also, and in Anganwadis also, the whole focus is on nutrition. Still, more people are going to private schools. And in government schools, you will find that one teacher teaches maximum of say 15, 20, 30. I mean, it's very hard to find a government school teacher teaching 30 students in one class, because the number of students are much less in government schools these days. But in private schools, you will find that one teacher is teaching, say, 60, 70 students in a class, and that is only one batch, right? So that is in every aspect, you will find that government schools are doing much better. But the government says these are the problems. But how come with those same problems on the same parameters, private schools fare worse But when it comes to teaching, when it comes to learning outcomes, how come they are doing much better? Now, what is the solutions that NEP is offering? It is proposing that we need to consolidate schools. So I don't know how many of you have gone to a village. What usually happens is that most of the schools, government schools, are spread around the area. So in my village, for example, there are two schools. One is still for primary students, and then till secondary school, 10th class. So these are the two schools. They are different campuses, different teachers, and different principals. So basically, they are two separate schools within the same village. Now, the government is saying that this is the case with like everywhere across the country. What we need to do is we need to consolidate them, at least administratively, if not physically. What we will do is that we will combine them. Then what happens is they have a chemistry teacher, but this school does not have a maths teacher. Maybe that school has that kind of classrooms that they may not have that resource. So by combining them, they can complement each other. They can share the resources together, and the government will also save money. The students will be able to learn better. They will be able to benefit from it. Now, this is a decent common sense step to take, but to say that this will change radically some things on ground is I'm not sure about that. Another important thing that this NEP has missed that was important, not missed, but it has mentioned it. That is the focus and the thing that comes to this thing is that it depends on the implementation stage, how it is implemented. For example, it has suggested that school complex management committees will be strengthened. Now, what does that mean is that parents will be the part of the school management committee. Okay, so they will be deciding so many things, and if they are in power, the government's thinking is that if the parents are in control of the local school, then it will be a much better place. Okay, now that is really a very good step as suggested by NEP, and I completely agree with it. But the problem is this the same solution was also part of the Right to Education Act, but it has not been implemented for the last 11 years. And Right to Education Act's focus has been majorly on private schools rather than government schools. Now, whether this happens and to what extent the parents will have the power over the local government school, that remains to be seen. That is the implementation part. But if it fructifies, then uh, then we should really be hopeful that some things can change for good. The second solution is regards to the teachers. Now, the government has proposed that teachers' salary increases will be and their promotions will be linked to their performance, which will be determined by a number of factors. So, there will be student reviews, peer reviews, attendance, and other factors. That will A report card will be prepared based on these scores on whether they have come daily to the school, how much rating the students have given, how much their peers have given the rating to these teachers. Based on those scores, they will get salary increases and promotions. Now, and of course, the salary increases will happen after the endorsement by school management committee, which will have parents of students. Now, this is great step, wonderful, but there are two problems. One, it does not include whether the student learning outcomes will be one of the factors that decide the salary increases. I think that's important. If your students are not doing improving well, if they are not scoring well, if their learning outcomes are not improving, why you should get a promotion, right? Second factor is I am not sure how this would fit into our reservation system. So we have quota system not only for recruitment of teachers, I think, but also promotions also. So if there are two teachers from different communities, from OBC, SC, STs, if they are up for promotion based on the reservation system, and if there are another teacher who is doing well based on student reviews, if his peers reviews are good, if his attendance is great compared to the person whose caste is different, so how that will that's very complex. We have no solution in sight for that. How will that be resolved? NAP is very silent on this. So again, it comes to the implementation, how that will be pushed through. Third area that has NAP has focused on is the teacher education. Now, teacher education, as we have seen in the last 7 decades, is mostly about B.Ed through B.Ed degrees, right? If you want to be a teacher, get a B.Ed degree. It's usually 2 years, 3 years. Right now, the solution that needed to be for modern times. For example, we are seeing so many coaching institutions coming up, online institutions coming up. For example, Byju's and UN Academy and other platforms where the teachers are not even they don't have any degree, apart from their expertise in their own subjects. There may be some engineer who did his BTech in computer science. He may be teaching physics in a coaching institution on Byju's. He may be teaching physics to a class 8 student, right? So there are so many thousands of teachers online due to online learning, and all these things have come up. Now, how do you prepare for that kind of future? That I think government has really missed the bus in sticking to the same B.Ed degree focused thing. So what they have said that anyone who wants to teach, whether in private schools or government schools, you will have to take a B.Ed degree. If you have, for example, 3 or 4 years of BSc or BTech in your specialized subject, then you can take 1 year B.Ed degree. If you are after 12th, if you have decided that you want to be a teacher, then you take a 4-year B.Ed degree. So there are 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, and 4 years of B.Ed degree courses that will come up. Moreover, not just this, all the B.Ed degree institutions will be multidisciplinary in nature. So, if you want to be a science teacher, if you want to be a maths teacher, what you will have to do is you will have to take admission in a B.Ed college. And if you are an expert in physics, then you will not only be taught physics there, you will also be taught social science subjects like psychology, history, political science, because the government thinks that if a teacher is equipped with all these social science subjects, he will be able to teach his own subject better. I cannot. It's very mysterious how that is possible, because if you are a physics, teacher, it it does not matter whether if you don't know history or psychology or social or other social science subjects. But I don't know. Maybe the problem is, as usually happens in government schools, physics teacher is usually found teaching other subjects also, or maths teacher is found teaching history, because there is no history teacher in government school or other subject teacher. So क्या होता है कि वहां से उसको बोलते हैं, अरे मास्टर जी आप ये सब्जेक्ट भी पढ़ा लो बच्चों को, मतलब हमारे स्कूल में टीचर तो है नहीं, क्या करें? So maybe that is the motivation. I don't know. Is anyway. So what I think, this whole degree based approach as far as teacher education is concerned is ridiculous. If anyone wants to be a teacher, for example, if there is an engineer who wants to spend his weekends teaching maths at a local school, why shouldn't he be allowed, right? Why should he be going to spend 1 year studying all these social sciences and his own subject again when he's an expert? He can teach the teacher there, actually. He's that kind of an expert. Why he needs to take a you know take this whole approach? So that is really weird. The government had a great opportunity to include all these thousands of teachers, new kind of teachers, into this system, but it has failed, sadly. Now, this, why they are doing it? Because if you have to see the mentality behind it. So the chairperson of NEP committee, he said that we want to make teachers a cadre which is as serious with credentials as any other cadre, such as computer engineer, mechanical engineer. Now understand the times we are living in, where an engineer, whether it is computer science engineer or electrical engineer, he does not know whether his own skills will survive another year. Forget about this whole cadre thing is a thing of past. I mean, it's obsolete right now. So what engineers have to do continuously is, after every 3 4 years, their skills get redundant and they have to retrain themselves. They have to learn new skills. So even in that environment, you are thinking of creating a cadre of teachers. And if I remember correctly, before Modi became prime minister, he used to talk about exporting teachers to the world. Now, think about something that we have teachers in, for example, Byju's or Unacademy or other online platforms. One teacher today can reach out to millions of students, and that is happening. This will be the future, where one good teacher will be taking tuition, for example, of millions of students, if he is good enough for that, right? So this is the kind of future that we are moving towards, and to think about that mass production of teachers is one of the solutions. I don't know. Maybe people have criticized me for this, saying that I do not understand what's happening. We need teachers in every school, every area, every village. But if you come to villages, I have visited so many, and you will find students uh, taking Byju's classes here. It's that much the world is changing. And to talk about all those old models is it's really incomprehensible to me. Anyway, so there are some good things in this as far as the policies affecting government schools are concerned. For example, teacher linking teacher salaries to their performance, and creating all these school management committees where parents may decide some things. So the government has understood two main problems, which are that the whole governance structure of government schools needs to change. There has to be some accountability. And by making parents an active participant in that, they have tried to address that problem. The other problem that they have tried to address is that government school teachers are paid much higher, but they are not accountable. So that problem, by linking their salaries and promotions to you know their performance, they have tried to address. But please remember, there is a big implementation challenge in these things. And as I highlighted, there is a reservation system that needs to be that needs to be taken care of, so before these things are implemented. Anyway, so it's there was a big opportunity to address so many things that they have overlooked, but there are some decent changes also. But a lot of it depends on implementation. Now we'll move to the NAP's proposals affecting private schools. Yeah. So one more thing. That's why I put it as one more thing, because I knew I would forget this. NEP has recommended a really dangerous and divisive idea. It is recommending that we will establish special schools in those areas where SCs, STs, and minorities population are in significant numbers, because the government has identified these caste and community groups as backward in education outcomes. Now, this is one thing to highlight, that these people, these sections need more care. They need to be you know they need to be given more focus. But to establish special schools which will become ghettos of certain communities or um, certain castes, that is really dangerous thing. If you take our school system, government school system, you will find that even today, uh, most of the students studying there usually are from disadvantaged groups. In rural areas, most of the SC/ST students are going to government schools. Anyone who can afford a private school is going to one. Okay, the only people who are left in government schools are only usually from the disadvantaged group. So rather than focusing on the entire school system, you are trying to solve a problem which does not exist. Why this whole ghettoization approach is going to be very problematic. Now, what the government has done is, it's not only the students of these special schools will come from certain communities, even the teachers. The draft NEP recommended that teachers will also be hired from these communities, special communities, whether they are minorities, SCs, STs. Our reservation system is already taking care of the SC/ST. So essentially, what we are doing is, we will only hire from the mostly. The new focus will be on the hiring from the Muslim minority community. So that is, and the government's reasoning here is that if a minority student or SC student sees that his teacher is also from his community, then he will feel more part of the school system. He will have a role model right there. I think that's the thinking is right, but what it will end up achieving is ghettoization of our school spaces. So that is really problematic. If the government really wanted to attack the problem, just focus on transforming the whole government school system. Anyway, so this is something that I wanted to highlight, because in coming years, we will see this play out really dangerously. We are already seeing that in Telangana, they have created special hostels and special schools for minorities and caste groups. So this is partitioning of students based on caste and community. So I don't need to explain to you the perils of this policy. So in this, we will talk about the policies that are affecting private schools. I think this is one of the very good parts of NEP, where for the first time the government has kind of admitted its own failures in how it has been handling the private schools for the last, at least for the last 10 years, especially that part. Because in 2009, the government passed the Right to Education Act, and that was one of the most draconian acts passed by any government. And the main idea was to tame the rise of private schools. Okay. So what was happening, as I highlighted, between 2010 and 2015-16, more than a crore people moved from government schools to private schools. So there was this huge constituency to be reaped for votes. So many poor students are leaving these government schools and want to join the private schools. So what you do, you pass a law that gives these poor students the right to study in a private school, and government will basically for free. So this is all. The idea was vote based, how to reap this benefit. And we know the reason why people are moving. It's not just because government schools are terrible, but after the 1991 reforms, people have higher incomes. And there is a rise of aspirational middle class, which sees government schools as regressive and private schools as progressive and aspirational. So they want to teach, and the English medium instruction is another aspect of that. So this whole transition from government schools to private schools was happening, and the government at that time, UPA, passed the Right to Education Act, understanding what was happening on the ground, understanding the vote potential of this move. Now, what the Right to Education Act did was that it said that 25% of the seats in private schools will be reserved for poor and disadvantaged students. Now, who are disadvantaged students? People who may be from SC/STs communities or minorities who are poor. They set a, every state was allowed to set a different economic criteria. 1 lakh family income per year, 2 lakh family income per year, or whatever. So they were free to do that. Now, what how it was implemented? So before admissions take place in April, what they would do is they would simply carry out a lottery. If there are, for example, 5 private schools in a place, and there are 10,000 poor students who want to join these 5 schools. So the government will carry out a lottery. How many seats are there? For example, 2,000 seats are there and 10,000 applications are there. So the government will carry out lottery of 2,000, pick 2,000 out of these 10,000 students, give them admission in these schools at 25% quota. And this the government, what was the deal? Originally the deal was that the government will pay the fees of these 25% poor students. How much it will pay? The same as is equivalent to what it spends on its own students in government schools. Now, if we look at the government school expenditure per pupil, it comes around, in most of the state, is it's more than 2 to 3,000 per month, only on the salaries that it spends on teachers. So 3 to 4,000 it is spending on all these per month. So that is 12 into 3, 36 to 40,000, let's say 40,000 per month, per year. Sorry. So if the government, any government is spending 40,000 per year, so it should pay the same amount to to private schools, right? For these poor students, but it did not. It set a arbitrarily fee structure where it said we will only pay you 500 per month. Okay, so for every poor student that we are giving to you, we will pay you 1,000 rupees. We will pay you 1,500. They said every state has set a certain this thing. Now, what happened was all these schools, all these private schools, they were teaching all this 25% of 1/4 of their whole students almost free of cost. So if there is the private schools fees is, for example, 2,000 per month, but the government was only paying 500 per month for the poor student. So they raised the fees on these remaining 75% students. Otherwise, they would not survive, right? And many thousands of schools did not survive. They had to close down. And this was just not just this 25% quota. There were so many restrictions put on private schools. So there were mandates, for example, for infrastructure, that you should have a library, you should have a computer lab, you should have science lab, you should have a playground of this and this dimension. So this the whole act was as if to punish the private schools somehow for doing better than government schools. So this national education policy, people have been clamoring for reforms in private school system ever since this government came to power in 2004. And national education policy, so many people lobbied to initiate these reforms. So I'm really happy that the NEP has addressed some of the problems. Not They have not, of course. We will see how it is implemented, and we will discuss what the government has proposed through NEP. So NEP has rightly diagnosed that the present structure of governance of school system is basically there is too much concentration of power in Department of School Education. It is doing provisioning also, it is regulating also, it is policy making function, carrying out that function also, it is also setting up syllabus, it is conducting exams also. So all sorts of these things it is doing. So government has said we will have a separate government body for all these functions. Policy making will be carried out by someone else. Syllabus will be set by someone else. Exams will be carried out by some other authority, other government authority. So all functions will be separated so that there is no conflict of interest as far as private schools are concerned. Right now, what happens is there is one department which is giving license to schools, which is also responsible for conducting exams, which is also responsible for three, four other main functions, policy making. So there is a lot of conflict of interest within this body. Now those powers will be separated. Now, see what the NEP says about its own failures, about the government's own failures over the last 10 years. It states that while stifling and ineffective regulatory regime has not been able to stop commercialization of education, it has managed to discourage public spirited private schools. So, this is a very bold statement, bold admission of its own failures. More importantly, as I highlighted in the RTE section, private and public schools are regulated differently, which has created an asymmetry. Not just an asymmetry, but also a lot of anguish in the private school community, which feel that government is mostly, rather than improving their own schools, it is focusing on punishing them. So the government says that we will be focusing on addressing these solutions in these problems. Okay, so of course, as I said, the first step is decentralization. All the powers, all the regulatory powers, policy making, academic matters will be handled by separate bodies. And more important, you see, the government, what these private schools have to do is they have to get accreditation. Okay, now that process will be made really easy. The private schools will only have to meet basic parameters, for example, safety and security. They don't have to follow these stringent proposals, suggestions from the government earlier. They don't have to have this many classrooms, that many labs or playground. All these infrastructure based things will be not be made mandatory, and it will not be the same for for example, every school, there will not be one size fits all approach at all. For example, if there is a private school in Delhi, he will that school will not be regulated on the same parameters that is regulating a school in, for example, a rural area. Okay, you cannot treat them as same, because in rural areas it's easy to get more land, it's easier to expand, it's easier to have a playground. But in Delhi, you cannot force a budget private school to, have this much, this dimension, that dimension of playground or the labs. So this is a really good approach that NEP has taken. Now what used to happen was, पहले inspection होता था, कोई भी जाके रेड मारना, गवर्नमेंट का कोई वो होता था, तो ऑफिसर he will go and वहां पे चाय पानी होगा उसका, he will take his own cut, and this inspector kind of approach was there. तो अभी उसको हटा के what will they do is, they will just allow every private school to have an open disclosure approach. So you just, whatever your school has, how many rooms, how many playgrounds, how many labs, you just put it out on the internet for everyone to see. Just be transparent. That's all the government is asking from you. And let parents make the choice whether they want to take admission in your. We are not going to tell you how much space you should have for classrooms, how much playground you should have, what labs you should have. You just disclose whatever you have, let the parents make the decision, but just take care of the safety, basic safety parameters that need to be fulfilled. So this is a really drastic approach as opposed to what we have been following for the last few decades, and especially for the last 10 years. And more importantly, as I said, that what RTE did was that it basically killed the ease of opening new schools, running schools, of course. So that the government has recognized that we need more and more people to come into this area to start new schools. Otherwise, their demand is so high. If you don't create the supply of new schools, the fees for in existing schools will keep rising. Okay, so to create good level of competition, to keep the fees down, you have to increase the supply of schools, and that can happen if you ease the establishing of new schools, if you ease the regulations. Now, to make it easier to open these schools, the government will encourage local variation. As I explained, there will not be any enforced mandates from the government to, have that many classrooms, that much playground, and other things. And the more the government wants to move towards learning outcomes. So if there are two schools, they will be rated based on how well their students are performing. Okay, not based on whether they have a playground or not. Okay, before that it used to happen like that. Your accreditation will happen if you have a playground. It will not happen if you don't have a playground. Right now the government says no, we will not be judging schools based on that. We will be seeing how good are your students learning. Okay, how well are they learning things, how well they can read class 5 text, class 8 text, can they do multiplication, can they do sum, can they read all these things, foundational literacy, numeracy, and other things. So they will have learning outcomes for each grade. Those on those parameters, these schools will be judged. As I said, input requirements for schools regarding land areas and room sizes, practicalities of playgrounds in urban areas, etc., will not be overemphasized. So the government has said this will be based on local needs and constraints, and educational outcomes and transparent disclosure will determine the assessment of schools. These proposals are brilliant as far as private schools are concerned. Now, there are three the most disastrous aspects of NEP RTE that NAP is silent on. Now, it does not say whether the RTE Act, will be extended to minority schools. So this is really a big problem because currently the Right to Education Act is not applicable on minority schools. So it's not clear whether the new act that the government will be preparing, whether that will apply to these minority schools. Second is whether private schools will be allowed admission autonomy. For example, what happens is, as I explained to you, in 25% of the quota that is reserved for RTE, the government selects these students through a lottery. Schools are not allowed to pick their own 25% of poor students in their area and teach them. This impacts the admission autonomy of these private institutions. For example, if anybody is starting a school, for example, why should not I be picking who I want, which poor student I want to teach in my school for free for under RT? Why shouldn't I be allowed that freedom, right? Why should government conduct a lottery and then send it to my school? So that has not been addressed. Reimbursement is a really big problem because, as I said, the reimbursement that that the government pays for this 25% quota is many times less than what the actual fees in a school is. Second, it does not pay on time. For example, admissions happen in April, and you will find that the government is paying after 2 years, and that too after putting a school of under a lot of stress. अरे भैया ये document क्यों नहीं दिया, वो document क्यों नहीं दिया? So government, these babus and government officials, they keep delaying the payment. So imagine you are effectively, 25% of the students in your school are being taught for free. So what will happen? Will you be able to sustain your school financially, because you have to pay teacher salaries? They are not subsidized. You have to pay electricity. You have to pay all these bills. You have to pay for transportation or whatever it is costing. You cannot expand because you are barely surviving with the fees that you are getting. So for 75% of the fees that you are getting from students, you have to finance 100% of the students. So either you close down, or you increase the fees on the remaining 75%. So they will not stay with you if you keep increasing the fees. They will keep leaving you. So who will join, right? So many schools have closed down, and this was one of the biggest damage that the RTE has done to budget private schools. So the NEP is not addressed, not convinced, not assured these schools that we will be increasing the reimbursement, or we will be making sure that we pay on time. So these are some things that needed to be addressed, but NEP is silent on all these three. Okay, so other two important issue is, one is, the government has said that we will not allow arbitrary increases in tuition fees. As I explained to you, why the fees are increasing, because you have gutted the supply of new schools by making sure, by harassing so many private schools, that nobody dares to open new schools. That is the main reason for all these fee increases. Second reason is that schools have to increase fees on 75% of their students, so that they can finance the 25% quota of poor students. If the government pays on time, if they pay well, they don't have to increase fees, they can remain viable financially. But these are the main reasons. Rather than focusing on that, the NEP says that we will not allow you to increase tuition fees, and we will set a certain this thing. We will have a government authority that will decide how much fees you will be allowed to increase every year based on inflation. So you will be able to increase for after 3 years and based on inflation. So I think this is a really regressive move without addressing the root causes of fee inflation. You are trying to suppress uh, all these schools from raising fees. Now imagine what usually happens in our country is election आ गया तो भाई कोई किसी एरिया में स्कूल्स को अपीज करना है पेरेंट्स को, तो आप बोलोगे कि इतना फीस होगा अगले साल से आपके स्कूल्स में, ठीक है, हम इतना फीस कर देंगे, हम फीस कम कर देंगे। तो ये ऑल इलेक्शन का एक वो बन जाएगा अगर आप गवर्नमेंट के हाथ में वो पावर दे देते हो कि वो स्कूल कितना फीस रखेगा। वो थोड़े शॉर्ट टाइम में अच्छा लगेगा कि हाँ यार फीस कम हो गया, बट इन द लॉन्ग रन schools will start closing down and you will have to increase fees. Otherwise there is no, if there is no supply, the only choice that people will have is to send them back to government school system, which is worse than whatever we have right now. The government has not been innovative in allowing, as I explained to you, all these B.Ed degrees ka system ऐसे कैसे रखा है. So that could have been, the government could have been bold enough to experiment on that, to allow all kinds of teachers to teach. Let the private schools make a decision. If they don't want to hire a B.Ed degree teacher, let them make this decision. Let them have their best. They can hire a BSc person. They can hire a BTech person. So why not allow them to make this decision? Why the government wants to impose a special degree that unless you have that, you cannot be a teacher? I think that is something that could have been avoided. Okay, now we will talk about policies affecting both private and government schools. We have addressed them separately so far, but there are certain things, certain policies that will be applicable to students studying in both kind of schools. So first we will talk about the good proposals. One of the most brilliant proposals is for the system to make them more flexible, at least from grade 9 to grade 12. So in these four classes, what usually used to happen is you will pick your whether you want to take science or maths or arts or commerce. So आपको पहले ही डिसाइड करना पड़ता था कि आपको साइंस लेना है या आर्ट्स लेना है या कॉमर्स लेना है, ठीक है। अब क्या होगा, यू कैन स्टडी मैथ्स, यू कैन स्टडी फिजिक्स, यू कैन स्टडी economics, you can study political science or history, you can study everything right now in the new system. So that flexibility has been given. Now some people will say यार जिसको इंजीनियर बनना है वो हिस्ट्री और वो साइंस पढ़ के क्या करेगा, but it's not just about वो पढ़ के क्या करेगा, he will have option. Now that system makes sense only if your board exams also are tailored to the subjects you have picked. अगर आप पहले क्या है ना कि अगर साइंस स्टूडेंट सिर्फ 5 सब्जेक्ट में ही बैठ सकते थे, PCM and one elective, and there will be one other subject. Okay, so these 4 or 5 subjects they would appear in, that was certain. Now what will happen is, what the government is proposing is that there will be exams for everything. You will be able to select which exams you want to set in. For example, you have picked, for example, you have picked physics, maths, economics, and computer science, or not computer or whatever, music or history. Okay, now you will be appearing only for, you will have a choice to appear only for these exams in your board exams. Your result sheets will reflect scores of these 4 or 5 subjects only that you chose to study. Now that system makes sense only if you are able to appear for entrance examination of in higher education institutions, right? Now what will happen is, right now anyone who is studying in who has taken science, PCM, ठीक है, किसी ने PCM लिया है तो वो IIT के लिए प्रिपेयर करता है, किसी ने PCB लिया है तो वो नीट के लिए प्रिपेयर करता है, किसी ने इकोनॉमिक्स और ये सब लिया है, आर्ट्स वगैरह लिया है तो वो DU के एग्जाम में या किसी और एग्जाम में, हायर एजुकेशन जो तुम्हारे JNU का हो गया या जादवपुर यूनिवर्सिटी हो गया या अदर यूनिवर्सिटीज हैं, उसमें आप एंट्रेंस एग्जाम में बैठ सकते हो, राइट? अब क्या होगा इन फ्यूचर, व्हाट विल हैपन इज, if your subject is physics, maths, economics and political science, you will be able to sit for entrance into IITs also, engineering institutions, as well as DU or JNU or other things. So simultaneously you can appear for, you have all these avenues open, there is so much flexibility. That is, I think, personally, I believe that is a really good option to have. And of course, what will happen is that right now entrance examinations happen कि भैया कौन से IIT में जाना है, कौन से मेडिकल इंस्टीट्यूशन में एडमिशन लेना है. आगे जाके ये हो जाएगा कि आपका, अगर आपने फिजिक्स लिया है तो आपका शायद जो फिजिक्स रिलेटेड डिपार्टमेंट्स हैं आईआईटीज में, जो मैथ्स फोकस्ड हैं, उनमें आपका सीधा स्ट्रीम्स में हो सकेगा. तो आपका कंप्यूटर साइंस में हो सकेगा या इलेक्ट्रिकल इंजीनियरिंग में हो सकेगा. DU में आपका एडमिशन नहीं होगा, आपका एडमिशन कॉलेज में नहीं होगा, आपका एडमिशन होगा पॉलिटिकल साइंस डिपार्टमेंट में, आपका एडमिशन होगा इकोनॉमिक्स के डिपार्टमेंट में. So that change will be coming, because to allow that flexibility, you will have to give flexibility at every stage. You will have to give it at while choosing your subjects, while conducting exams for boards, and then while conducting entrance examinations for higher institutions. So this is a really good proposal. Of course, the focus on foundational literacy and numeracy with the learning outcomes, that's a good proposal. Medium of instruction, another brilliant proposal that the government has said that wherever possible, the medium of instruction will be your mother tongue or regional languages. ठीक है, but the only problem is इसमें लिखा है कि wherever possible. So I believe that status quo will continue because the government has not made it mandatory. But another good thing is that the government has said we will prepare the textbooks in all regional languages. So once that is done, right now the problem is, even if the government had mandated that सबको सभी schools को mother tongue में पढ़ाना पड़ेगा, that would not have been feasible because आपके पास textbooks ही नहीं है. But now the government has said we will prepare the textbooks, and once that is done, we will be able to, remove that wherever possible and make it mandatory. So this is one of the best proposals in NAP. There are some problematic suggestions also, and these are really big as far as this school system is concerned. The government has said we will reduce the content. So this is one of the big buzzwords these days. So that कि भैया 50% सिलेबस को कम कर दो, क्या क्या फालतू चीजें पढ़ा रहे हो, बच्चों पे बर्डन डल रहा है, ये वो. But an interesting thing the government has said is that we want to make space for critical thinking, more holistic, inquiry-based, discovery-based, discussion-based, and analysis-based learning, as if the syllabus is preventing from that. But if you are giving so much flexibility to students, then there is no need to reduce the syllabus. The problem that most of the students have is not that they have to study so much syllabus. It's usually because they don't want to study the syllabus that they are not interested in. Okay, the syllabus itself is not a problem. It's all about interest, and if the students are able to choose the subjects they are interested in, then ideally it makes sense to increase more of that syllabus in that subject, right? So I think that this whole populist message of reducing content is good for getting good scores in 10th and 12th, but in the long run it is very damaging to the students as well as to country as a whole. Another thing is they have said we will introduce experiential learning. Now this includes arts-based, in sports integrated, hands-on learning. When it comes to science subjects, experiential learning is good, but when it comes to social sciences, एक्सपीरियंशियल मतलब आपको एक्सपीरियंस करना है हम चीजों को. अभी आपका मतलब कोई सोशल साइंस में कॉन्सेप्ट है कि there is some atrocity happening somewhere, you have to experience that, आप उनका पेन फील कीजिए and all that nonsense. It's good when it comes to STEM topics. Experiential learning आपको experiment कर करके थोड़ा आपको पता चले, that is good. But in social science subjects, it will be problematic. For example, a recent example was there was this NGO or this social science organization which was teaching all these students in high-end private school in Delhi, you know, how males can also breastfeed and things like that. So, that whole that sex and, your sex is different and your gender is different. So all uh, these kind of experiential learning में ये सारी दिक्कतें आएंगी when you try to inject that into social sciences. As far as STEM subjects are concerned, it's good. But we will have to see again how it is implemented. Now, student assessment may, what I see is that they are effectively killing the board examinations. But first, they have said that we will prepare such examinations, board examinations, so that we will eliminate the need for undertaking coaching classes. Because the government feels that existing system of board and entrance examinations is basically focused on it promotes coaching classes, coaching culture. I think this is really wrong assessment, because if you really look at the data, you will find that tough examination systems, for example, IITs, NEET, and whether it is UPSC or other tough examinations, they have bigger coaching industry. You really don't need coaching to crack 12th board exams or 10th board exams, but more people are involved in taking coaching when it comes to these tough examinations. So to believe that board exams are promoting tuition culture because they are based on rote learning is a really wrong reading of the situation. Main problem why we have more coaching for these tough examinations is because schools do not have adequate teaching faculties, in these schools, and they have to go out and learn from the experts who only coaching factories can afford to hire them, because they are all these engineers, doctors, they are very experts in their subjects. वो बीएड डिग्री तो नहीं लेने जाएंगे ना, 1 साल का 2 साल का, to get hired for a school. So this is how coaching and tuition culture gets promoted. Okay. So what government will end up doing in their hopes to mellow down the boards, they will kill this whole system. Board examinations will not be uh, as important as they are now. So the government, by two suggestions, you should look at it. National Testing Agency, the government says it will conduct specialized common subject exams. For example, NTA, which is being formed, and it is conducting examinations for IITs, IIMs. It will be single agency that will conduct all the examinations for higher education. Government says that this same agency will conduct specialized common subject exams कि देश में एक मैथ्स का पेपर होगा से 5वीं क्लास में पूरे देश में जिसको अपीयर होना है अपने मन से he will appear and that will point out rankings कि भैया देश में मैथ में सबसे आगे कौन है ना फिजिक्स में कौन है केमिस्ट्री में कौन है हिस्ट्री में कौन है पॉलिटिकल साइंस में कौन है सो विल हैव स्पेशल special olympiads kind of exams for different classes and different subjects. So I think over the time boards will have no importance left. All these olympiad kind of exams will happen. I on The government will be conducting them, and there will be other private agencies that will be conducting these exams. And based on the reputation of whose scores are more, credible, these higher education institutions, IITs, IIMs, they will be, taking entrance admissions of these students based on their scores. So we will slowly move from boards to all these Olympiad system. So this is really good. I mean, they are on one side they are trying to, water down the board system and promote this highly competitive subject examination based thing. So if I'm good at maths, I don't need anything else. I can just focus on it. I can appear for Olympiads. I can appear for NTA test of maths of class 12, and based on that score, maybe I can get admission into some higher education institution that values that score. So I think this is a good step. Unwittingly, they will be end up doing good. So that this is really one of the most one of the best parts of this NEP student assessment. Okay, so some things are missing. For example, homeschooling they have said only for students who are who have disabilities. Otherwise, in this age of learning, I think homeschooling should have been allowed in a big way, because when RT came in 2009, it effectively banned the whole system. But now, why can't someone, for example, take a Byju's class in the morning, go for a culture class in their own locality, and then come back, say, to do some other course online. So this whole system of going to school at 9 a.m. and coming back at 2 p.m., I think this is obsolete, and the government should have promoted homeschooling and online learning in this day and age. So that is a big miss, according to me. Many people may not agree, but at least this should have been given as an option. Yeah, so I think one of the big focus area of the syllabus content that government has envisioned through NEP is to, which I call the Gandhification. They will be teaching us. They say that we will be teaching Indian knowledge systems, which is a good thing. But the NEP says that students will be taught what's right. And how will that be taught? It will be taught by imparting values such as seva, ahimsa, swachhata, satya, nishkam karma, shanti, sacrifice, tolerance, diversity, pluralism, righteous conduct, gender sensitivity, respect for elders, respect for all people and their inherent capabilities, regardless of background, respect for environment, helpfulness, courtesy, patience, forgiveness, empathy, compassion, patriotism, democratic outlook, integrity, responsibility, justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. So the government will teach all these great values to the students, and the students will come out of the schools as enlightened beings who will have compassion, who will have these all these great qualities just by learning at school. So I'm very skeptical of this whole Gandhification of the school syllabus. Anyway, uh, as I say in this slide, as I've written earlier, that I have full conviction that the Indian state does not have any to teach what's right, but what's convenient or politically palatable. So all these kids will learn ahimsa paramo dharma and all these Gandhian values. So let's see. Okay, so now we will. It's very small section, but very important section. Higher education. It's mostly filled with very bad ideas. The biggest one is that government has said by 2040 we will convert all higher education institutions into multidisciplinary institutions. So every institution will teach everything. Right now, what we have under the Nehruvian system, what I call the Nehruvian system, is that IITs teach you engineering, IIMs teach you management, IISc is for science, JNU is for social sciences, Jadavpur is for social sciences, DU has colleges for science also, for social science also. So there is separation of these specialized institutions we have. That was the system that was set up by, you can credit to Nehru or the so called Nehruvian people. But that is the system that we have carried so far. Now, some people will say, "अरे भैया IIT में भी arts पढ़ाते हैं, IIT में भी social science है, humanities है." But please understand, there is a difference between having one or two department and having 30 departments. So I know there are IITs which have these humanities departments. I think every IIT has one or two. If some may have even 6 7 departments. I am not disputing that. So please understand what I am trying to say, where we are headed in future. Now what will happen is the government says that even engineering institutions such as IITs will move towards more holistic and multidisciplinary education with more arts and humanities. That's the line in NAP. I don't understand this logic of injecting of liberal arts into anything and everything. This seems to me that they have so much focus on injecting this. The whole NEP, whether you are at B.Ed colleges, whether it's a school system, everywhere they are focused on this. Now, I think you may ask why they are doing this. What is if it's not broken, the system is working fine. Then why are we trying to create this whole departments of humanities, new departments in every institution, even in IITs, IIM? See, according to me, the motivation here is to improve rankings of in these world rankings that आप सुनते होंगे पेपर्स में कि इंडिया 200 टॉप 200 में भी नहीं आता कोई भी इंस्टीट्यूशन. ठीक है, काफी जगह पढ़ा होगा आपने, हर साल आते रहते हैं वर्ल्ड रैंकिंग्स. तो ये 2 3 इंस्टीट्यूशन हैं वो वर्ल्ड रैंकिंग निकालते हैं और किसी ना कोई आईआईटी ना कोई आईआईएम टॉप 100 में टॉप 200 में अपना स्थान बना पाता है. तो गवर्नमेंट ने सोचा कि यार क्या दिक्कत है कि हम व्हाई वी आर नॉट एबल टू कम, our IITs are so famous for their excellence, still we are not able to come top 100. So they found out that the world rankings are based on the Western idea of university, where they have 300 400 departments in one university. In US, Harvard or UCLA or in UK में Cambridge or other universities, they have every department. They teach engineering, they teach management, they teach social science. They teach everything at every university. They may be famous for one or two departments, but they usually have everything. So that is a big factor in why they get higher ranking compared to IITs. क्योंकि IITs में diversification नहीं है, so we get far behind in the rankings. Now, should we change our whole system just because we want to look good in those world rankings that nobody cares? I mean, those rankings in the West, they have no value, right? So why we have put such a big value that we are willing to change the entire system of our higher education system, which is not broken. So this is really curious. I don't know why they are doing it. It's not necessary. It is very harmful. Right now you have what I call as genuification हो जाएगा, which many people say नहीं already IIT में है humanities और arts, तो अभी तक नहीं हुआ तो आगे क्यों होगा? क्योंकि ऐसा होगा कि जो आपके IITs हैं उन्हीं के जो टेक्निकल जो आपका है वही डायरेक्टर बनता है, he is deciding everything, but your engineering department will be just one out of 30-40 departments in future, and most of the departments will be catering to social sciences. And and this is the second worst idea. So this is the second worst idea. After creating all these multidisciplinary institutions, they will make them free. So they will give them full freedom to decide everything. They will have full autonomy, and they will get full funding. Now imagine uh, giving full autonomy to say JNU in 2014. How would that have played out if the government had no control over resources? Imagine if every university, every college becomes like that. Uh, Everything will be taken over by one ideology, people of one ideology, and the government will not be able to do anything. If they have not been able to change the character of JNU in the last 6 years, imagine what will happen to the thousands of, at least hundreds of universities across the country. Right now, you have all these problems in 2 or 3 universities in whole India. Then you will have these kind of violence and this kind of ideology wars everywhere. So this is a whole recipe for disaster. First, converting every institution into multidisciplinary one, and then giving them full autonomy. Third worst idea, as I said, just like in schools, they will be setting up higher education institutions in those areas where SCSTs and minorities are in significant numbers. And moreover, the government has said the admission process will be made more inclusive, even in private institutions. Curriculum will be made more inclusive. I don't know how they will define the term inclusive, or how who will implement that inclusiveness even in private schools. But if the government will decide how whether how to admit students in a private college, or how what should be their curriculum, I think that is very problematic, and it goes against its own championing of the autonomy idea also. So this is another bad idea. Now people will say, यार कुछ अच्छा भी है इसमें higher education में सारे मतलब worst idea, second worst idea, third worst idea. Is there anything good as far as higher education is concerned? So of course there is some good thing also. So NEP is basically there are three good ideas. One is that institutions and faculty autonomy will be there as far as curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment within a broad framework of higher education qualification. So you will have individual institutions will deciding on the curriculum based on what's being going on in the world. For example, if there is an IIT and they want to update their syllabus, they don't have to look to other this thing. So they will have that autonomy to change syllabus continuously to update it. And second is vocational training. They are mainstreaming into credible higher education institutions. So you will have direct partnerships with industry and these higher education institutions. Industry will be able to tell these that we need these kind of skills, and uh, you hire special people outside of your own student base to supply us that labor. So these higher education institutions, which are excellent in nature, for example, IITs, let's take that as an example. They can take that special make partnership with the industry and train certain people and supply it to the people who need it to these industries. And then last, breaking up of all these 3 or 4 year degree courses into 1 or 2 year certificate courses. So if you want to do, say for example, you have taken admission in an engineering college, but after 1 year you find that I want to do some job now. I want to do some internship in the industry now. I have got this job offer. I want to work. So after 1 year, you will be able to quit your college. You will have your. It will not be a waste. Unlike previous system, you will have your credits. You will be able to quit it, get your diploma, 1 year diploma, work for a company, and if you feel you come back 2, 3, 4, 5 years later in the same college, you complete your next 2 or 3 years. So basically, this is a really great setup that we are moving towards in this continuous age of learning, right? We are continuously have to update our skills. So आप 1 साल जाइए वहां पे स्किल सीख के आइए, आप काम करिए इंडस्ट्री में, फिर आप को जरूरत पड़ती है तो आप दोबारा सीखने के लिए कॉलेज में आ सकते हैं. यू विल हैव अ डिजिटल क्रेडिट सिस्टम. वहां पे आपके क्रेडिट स्टोर होंगे डिजिटली, वहां पे अपडेट होते रहेंगे. सो दिस इज रियली अ मॉडर्न सॉल्यूशन फॉर मॉडर्न टाइम्स. But there are so many bad ideas which I feel they are bad. Some people may not feel so. That it really won't matter if, because the damage potential of those bad ideas is really too much. And there is not much to be gained from vocational training if you are brainwashed enough to believe that internship is child labor or job is slavery. As the JNU Student Union president tweeted when she was in news. So अगर आपका ब्रेन वॉश इतना हो चुका है in these colleges, social science influenced by social sciences, कि आप सोचते हो कि इंटर्नशिप चाइल्ड लेबर है, तो आप कितने ही रिफॉर्म्स लेके आ जाओ, you cannot achieve anything, right? So the whole crux of this NEP is that there are so many good ideas in this, whether it is government schools, whether it is private schools, whether it is higher education, but they will all depend on how well the government is able to execute those on the ground. But all the bad ideas are so easy to implement, and they can create a havoc on these institutions. So that we need to be guard against, and let's see what happens. I'm hopeful that government will be able to implement all the good ideas, and somehow the bad ideas will not be turn out to be so bad enough. Thank you.
Mike,
Thank you.
actually, I have two questions. First is you talked about 25% seats reserved for economically weaker sections in some private schools. So that is filled through lottery system. So
Yeah.
is this just a economic problem or there is another aspect to it?
No,
For
as I explained, it's not just about economics; it's also about autonomy. So if I am a school owner, I want to have full control over the students, the quality of students that I admit. For example, I can also teach poor students 25% if I am allowed to select those 25%, that demographic. I should be able to select those 25% poor students. I should be able to, for example, conduct an entrance exam for all the poor students in my area and select, say, 25% top students. It's also catering to the same, social justice theme. So it's not just about the economics that are impacting these schools. It's also about your control your own school. If you cannot have control over admissions to your own school, then there is no point of running the school, right? You are just not an observer. It's your own school, so you should have that autonomy.
My second question is about integration of humanities and social sciences into technical universities or colleges. So, how it is a problem? One thing you mentioned that if the whole ideology is run by some yes, same kind of ideology, that is the problem. How can we stop that?
I don't know how to stop that actually. I mean, it's the only way is to somehow find people on the other side to appoint as teachers, as faculty members there to reform the admission process in these institutions. But you have to understand that there is a reason why people who are on the right usually don't take all these social science courses. Okay, they are mostly either engineers or they believe in money. I think that is the problem. So they are usually found minting money somewhere, whether they are MBA or they're doctors, they're engineers, all these good professions which earn well. They are found working there. But all these professors in these government departments, all these activists, all these, they are from social science background. So I think it's also because this whole profession somehow uh, they have this whole system where you don't need to go do work in the real world, right? So it's all about ideas, and they because they have been doing that for the last many decades, they have created this whole corpus, whether in textbooks, and the other side has is working in on the ground, basically as engineers, as doctors. They're not interested in this. So of course their representation, their thoughts are not represented in this academia. So it's really a problem, even in the US, where conservatives don't have any lack of resources. They have billions of dollars at their hand, right? And they don't certainly don't lack numbers as far as population is concerned. And still, the US academia, every institution has been taken over by the left. I don't know of any other country which has the so-called right in the academia. So you really have to wonder: can we achieve the impossible? I mean, talking about idealism is fine, but if you couldn't change the nature of JNU or Jadavpur in the last 6 years, then what hope do you have of doing it for thousands of universities?
Why is it that in the case of economically disadvantaged sections, every commission that comes to examine whatever problem cannot go beyond group identity and simply fix some kind of economic criteria that's saying that somebody who is poor, regardless of their community affiliation, deserves some kind of state aid? This would be very simple to do and least controversial. And the second part is for higher educational institutions. Where from does this rush to make everything multidisciplinary come? I mean, why is there such a rush to make it multidisciplinary besides the ranking, of course? But, don't you think this is going to create a great mess? I mean, for the medical profession, at least, specialization is key.
Yeah, so to answer your first question, see, it's not just that Of course, the thinking is always, the left is always thinking in terms of group identities. It's not a champion of individual rights. So when they propose something, it will always be focused on group identities. But we should not just blame the left. We should also focus on how the politicians think. And so when left interacts with politicians, they will say कि ऐसा ग्रुप आइडेंटिटी पे फोकस करके SC ST माइनॉरिटीज पे फोकस करके हमको ये बनाना चाहिए स्पेशल स्कूल बनाने चाहिए तो पॉलिटिशियंस रियली लाइक दिस आइडिया बिकॉज जब वो वहां पे रैली में बोलेंगे कि भैया देखो हमने पूरे SC STs के लिए इतना स्पेशल स्कूल का चेन बनाया है ना स्पेशल कॉलेज खोले हैं स्पेशल ये किया है माइनॉरिटीज के लिए ये किया है तो people there is certain vote catching exercise to do there so it has a lot to do with that kind of populism also as much as it is to do with ideology so both politicians and the left leaning policy suggestion makers are also in cahoots and win-win kind of situation but I agree with you as I said government schools across the country have become ghettos of disadvantaged kids studying there, poor kids studying there. And even if you focus on that, you will be doing so much. If you do that secularly, you will be doing so much good to the poor and the disadvantaged groups. So, but I don't know, there is some appeal to announcing that we will be creating special schools for these certain sections. Second, of course, I agree with you. There is a lot of mess going to be created. The virus that is currently infecting only a couple of places will be injected into every higher education institutions. And as you are saying in the US, whether it is Harvard or whether it is some low level college, everywhere there is violence taking place. The cancel culture, stifling free speech. So all these leftist bastions they have become and they are suffering from it. So we are moving, suddenly we have decided to move in that terrible direction. I don't know why, but it's going to be really messy. I agree completely.
I have done some work in rural areas in education long time ago, not recently, disclaimer. And one of the things which I found that in a typical rural area, in a public school, actually teachers are like seen as kind of gods because they just control the future of the kids and parents will do whatever. So even if you put parents in those school committees and all to decide on the performance and whatever for the teachers, I don't think it's going to work because of that whole setup and how people see those teachers in the school, and parents will do whatever to get good marks for their kids and whatnot. So having said that, I think the whole thing that, and I also believe that this is my personal belief that a lot of these school teachers actually get into that profession because there's a government job, so which is like secure for life, and there is all of that. And somehow that nexus has to be broken. And I don't know about NEP, but whatever I heard from you in this session today, I don't think that is getting addressed right now. So I think, in my opinion, that's one big problem. You also mentioned while talking about the government school things that ghettoization by creating those schools about these communities, which Colonel Ramakrishnan also referred to as just it should be just economic and not something else. But as you rightly pointed out, because of the politics and election and whatnot, they like doing it. Which brings me to my question that considering that the autonomy has to also be provided to the private school and you have to address this weaker section, I'm not sure what is the way out. Do you have any ideas about that? How you can break that chain? Because Politicians want this, and on the ground the situation is that there is a section of our community which is poor and requires aid and support. And I know the intent of RT, and of course I do not know the people who formulated it, but what can be done practically on the ground to address that?
So basically two aspects you talked about. First, see, it's not that people treat school teachers as gods, but the real problem is that the students who are going to these government schools, what I have seen is that what I have heard from the government school teachers is that parents are not really worried about their kids at all, because these people are from disadvantaged groups, and even after they don't they are always in the fields or working somewhere as labor, uh, you know and they really don't have any time to address attend to their kids as far as education is concerned. Maybe they don't understand, they are too poor, they are too busy earning their livelihood, that they would better, they would prefer that their kid also come along with them and do some work, right? So I have heard from teachers that despite their repeated requests, the parents don't come to the school to understand what problem the child is facing at school, what he needs to do, and other things. So rather than that huge respect, it's more about it's complete that we don't care kind of attitude is more problematic. And second part, how what we can do, there is a lot of things that government can do. If, for example, government spends 40 to 50,000 per month, or at least per year, on whatever number of students it has in its own government schools. So if we put that all money together and pay even half of that amount directly into the bank accounts of these kids, on the condition that they take that money only to pay for the fees in a private school somewhere, in budget private schools. So if that can be done by the school vouchers that can be redeemed at private schools, at least that option should be given. So at least half of the money that is spent on teachers' salaries in government schools, it's obscene. The amount is obscene, 50,000, 60,000 per month. These teachers are getting, and they are not, benefiting anyone. So if that half of that money can be channeled into the school vouchers, I mean, today we have DBT, right? Direct benefit transfer is happening, thousands of crores of rupees. So why can't we do it for kids? Why can't we do that? And if there is a modern RT to be, formulated, so that can be a great way to start. That can be a great element. And forget that, even if we can say through RTE, if the government can increase the reimbursement and pay it on time sincerely, then also a lot of problems can be addressed. For example, we talk about right to education. There is a lottery. Where is the right? It's a lottery. It's not a right, right? It's 2 lakh students are want to study, 2 lakh poor students, but only 10,000 are winning the lottery. So it's not a right to education. It's a lucky to be getting admission, right? So that is a big problem with that. So there are a lot of things we can do. We can improve the RTE Act. We can do direct benefit transfers. We can do vouchers. A lot of things. The options की कमी नहीं है, लेकिन कमी है इंटेंट की, क्योंकि एजुकेशन को कोई समझ नहीं रहा है अभी। ना तो ये करंट गवर्नमेंट है, इसको कोई फर्क पड़ता है कि एजुकेशन सेक्टर में, नहीं तो they would have I should not say it anyway. So this is the problem. So all about political will.
Namaste, sir. My question was about the 9th to 12th. When we are to choose any subject, are there going to be minimum amount of subjects or maximum or any number of subjects that we can choose?
Hey, these are very much into details, but policy का objective होता है कि you just outline the intent, right? When the things move forward, when the CBSE forms its own thing, they will decide कि भैया कितने minimum कुछ करना पड़ेगा या आप free हो बिल्कुल full flexibility है आप physics भी पढ़ो आप computer science भी पढ़ो आप economics भी पढ़ो आप political science भी पढ़ो whether we will move to complete flexibility or whether we will have some moderation where you will have कि भैया आपको PCM अगर आप साइंस स्टूडेंट हो PCM लेना पड़ेगा लेकिन आप पॉलिटिकल साइंस या इकोनॉमिक्स में से एक चीज ले सकते हो सो यू विल हैव दैट काइंड ऑफ सिस्टम अभी NEP में ये सब लिखा नहीं है दे हैव जस्ट सेड वी विल प्रोवाइड फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी तो वो आगे डिटेल्स में जाएंगे तो जब गवर्नमेंट अगला इम्प्लीमेंट करेगी तब ये पता चलेगा अभी तो कुछ क्लैरिटी नहीं है इस पे but at least it will be better than the current system so be happy.
Namaskar, sir. Sir, my question is about the recruiting of teachers in rural areas. Actually, in my village, what I saw that the teachers who are teaching there, they are not even have done their B.Ed and they are not so educated, but they are teaching. What about?
Okay, that is, I think, illegal what you are talking about. So please do a story on that. I think if somebody has got employment by fudging his degrees, I think that is really something. But yeah, even if they have degrees and if they don't know how to teach, that's not really surprising. That happens all the time. So I don't know what to do about that. You have to improve the recruitment system in the country. And once you have this whole one size fits all approach where you recruit thousand, say 10,000 teachers for your state cadre, and these things will happen. There will be corruption. Some people will get in through bribery, and that whole mess will continue. But why do you think private school, no matter how small it is, ends up being duped, but a government which has all the resources at its hand is being duped all the time by normal citizens. So this is all about incentives, all about how the management is structured.
Actually, sir, when I inquired about this in my village, Gram Panchayat told me that there is a rule that Gram Panchayat can appoint anyone as a teacher in middle school.
Acha.
And sir, my second question is about the syllabus. We are changing our education policy, but what about syllabus that we are reading from past 10 years and 20 years? But at present, I don't think we need those syllabus.
नहीं वो सिलेबस भी बिल्कुल नया आएगा 2020-21 में द डेडलाइन इज टू set up a national curriculum framework. So by April, that is the deadline, we should have a NCF 2021. And based on that, the new syllabus will be formed. So Insha Ganesha, we will soon have a new syllabus. So that don't worry about that. As far as that recruitment by at your village is concerned, I think that may be a state rule that Gram Panchayat is allowed to recruit some teachers, maybe on contract. I don't know. So that is possible, and they may not have degree, but it's all depends on the Gram Panchayat. They may have thought that the person is competent to teach, so they hired it, or maybe he bribed them to some official in Gram Sabha. So it's all we can't say anything, but you should inquire more.
I have 2 or 3 questions maybe. Firstly, what is the process of update of NEP Is this fixed for 10 years, as Modi ji in his speech said that for 2030 we are looking at a transformation of education? How does the community, civil society sort of give feedback, and is it modifiable, or is this sort of written in stone?
See, Rahul, if some government comes into 2024 and decides, अरे नहीं ये तो खराब पॉलिसी है और हम अपना नया पॉलिसी लाएंगे 2 महीने में एक नया पॉलिसी आता है तो the whole thing will change. But right now, from this government, if the same government repeats again, the same policy will continue. There are deadlines. There are certain things to be done by 2021. Then there are certain things to be done by 24, 2030. So the different deadlines are there depending on the things. For example, the textbooks in regional languages, I think the deadline is 2030. And the deadline to convert every higher education institution into a multidisciplinary one, that deadline is 2040. So there are different deadlines, I think, over the next 20 years. So that may be the reason why Narendra Modi is saying that it's a 30-year policy or 20-year policy, whatever.
And in the middle of this, suppose the same government remains, does the policy, do they keep accommodating at some regular intervals? Any feedback?
I don't think so, but see, any government department, if you have, if some minister changes tomorrow for HRD, and if he decides to do something which you want, which is not part of the policy, it's not like कोई बोलेगा अरे भैया ये तो NEP में था ही नहीं आप क्यों कर रहे हो, ऐसा नहीं है. So it's basically, it's just a policy. Policy does not matter. What you do with it is what matters. So it can change. Without changing it, things can change on the sidelines.
Okay. Second question was around RTE. It was deeply anti-Hindu, especially in its approach to private schools. With a land area for playground and teacher-student ratio and so on and so forth. I couldn't clearly gather this, but has that been corrected? Firstly, is RTE repealed by the NEP, or RTE remains, or has it been bypassed? What is the legal structure of that?
No. RTE cannot be repealed by a policy. It will have to be repealed by an act itself in the parliament. So if the draft NEP that came out last year, based on which this final NEP has come, so that draft NEP had talked about amending the Right to Education Act to accommodate the vision outlined in the NEP. And the same thing, the RTE itself is not named, but the lot of suggestions that are there in NEP to focus on outcomes rather than infrastructure and other things. So we will have a amended RTE very soon. But as I said, I'm not sure whether that will apply to minority schools as well, because that's a separate issue.
What could people on the dharmic side or the Indian conservative side do after listening to you and this video, say on the principle of minorityism embedded in the RT? What could they potentially do? Could they write a suggestion to the government? Could they write letters?
They know the government is very much aware of what needs to be done. Article 30 needs to be changed, but that is the government thinks, at least its legal advisors have advised the government somewhere that you cannot change that because it will be in contravention of the basic doctrine of Indian Constitution, basically. So basic structure, Article 15 to 30 is basic structure. So you cannot change that. So if the government wills, of course, anything can be changed, and they can be argued in courts as well. That, but unless you change Article 30, there is not much hope, because as such, RT does not say कि भैया it will not apply to minority schools, right? It applied to every school. but then the people move to courts. The minority institutions move to court that it cannot apply to us. Then the Supreme Court said, yes, it cannot apply to you because Article 30 is there. It gives you protection from government interference. So that's the thing. Article 30 has to go. Government knows that this is the problem, but the reason, I don't know the reason why they have not chosen to act so far.
I'm from a career counseling and guidance industry. So I would like to know that what kind of guidelines can be given to my professional people so that we can understand NEP in the best way and help students.
Okay, I did not understand what you want from me. Like, you can read the document. It's a very small document, so you can see what is relevant to you that ways.
Yeah, so what I mean to say is that when a student comes to decide on certain subjects, initially we were doing the aptitude test and current interest test and psychometric test. Now, what other additional input can be added to it to get the student to the best job or career or to
No,
guide them, because we start
it is
even
not
from.
impacted by the NEPs anyhow. So whatever you were doing, NEP is not going to change anything that in that ways. So you can keep applying your methods, and as a professional, you would know much more than me. So I don't think I should be advising you on that. But NAP, as far as I know, is not going to impact what you are advising based on your professional competence to the students.
My question is that do you think RTE is really needed at this point in time with enrollment close to 10%? Do we really need a law like this? It's time that we move past RTE. In fact, in my opinion, it should just be repealed right now. I mean, because we have concerns that go beyond RTE now.
Yeah, I mean, if we were living in a politician-free world, we could have argued for that. But there are lakhs of people who are getting access to private schools based on RTE. For example, I think in Rajasthan there are 3-4 lakhs students, poor students who go to private schools every year for free of cost. So that is a large constituency across the country. There are lakhs of students like that. So if you stop that, you are effectively uh, putting so many lakhs of votes in jeopardy, and I don't think any politician would like to touch that. So at best, you will have is that something like where schools will be allowed a choice to participate in RTE, like Ayushman Bharat, where hospitals have a choice, but currently RTE does not provide that choice. So there will be some reforms in the way RTE is there, but I don't think any government will stop such a populist and popular act from being implemented.